I want to think about. I mean, like, VortiX. I think after what people saw in round one, has to be a clear favorite. You saw it by the seeding as well. Like him and his brother have been dominant. DeMusliM always feels like he's consistently there, one of the biggest grinders. But it's been a while since we've got the pleasure of seeing him annihilate everyone in one of these big events. Let's see if he can do it here with the grand final participant of the first round of Golden League.
Exactly. DeMusliM, he definitely needs to get some points on the board here in the second round of Golden League. He only got away with 5 points, finishing in the top 24 in the first round. So for him, if he cannot get a decent amount of points over here in the second round, he's going to have a tough time getting into the top 4 playoffs at the end of Golden League. Whereas, as we discussed in the pregame, for VortiX, a good run here in the second round of Golden League essentially guarantees his spot in the playoffs.
First thing we've got to address, it's Delhi. You think about mirrors, you think about little nitpicky details that make the difference. You got to kind of look at the generation, see if anyone got something favorable. First eyeballs are going to be set on the deer locations, and I feel like VortiX got a better deal here. Deer stacks to the corner. You can think about berries, but I think they're kind of mirrored. Both players got a similar kind of meshing of locations here. But these deer on the backside with the wood lines, it's a very easily wallable area for VortiX. And long term, you can play into that stone outcropping afterwards once he reaches castle age and boom up castles. So I do like his starting location a bit better. I wouldn't be surprised if DeMusliM tries to face as the aggressor here to ensure that his position being slightly worse doesn't cause him to be punished. But we are going to see the TOV mirror. That was always anticipated. Doma Faith really hasn't been seen much, surprisingly enough, so far in competitive play. But I think that's because so far, whenever we see Delhi, it's either up against a Civ where you need that extra attack speed, such as someone like the Ottomans, or it's because we keep seeing Delhi mirrors where if you don't go TOV and your opponent does, you've already kind of given over the game. I wonder if we could see the double mosque quickly, though. Something I think DeMusliM does quite frequently is double blacksmiths. I'd say, actually, especially in Delhi Mirrors, he is one of the most frequent players to go for the double blacksmiths after a stables opening. VortiX, I wouldn't be surprised if he just tries to get the archery range up a little bit faster and maybe secure that central sacred site.
And that central sacred site is going to be the make or break, because you're essentially guaranteed one back at home, but whoever can get a nice little foothold in the middle right at the beginning could easily snowball this game, because in a mirror, we talk about this all the time, tiny details matter. Timings of upgrades, one good fight taken, or having one extra site even just for an extra minute over your opponent.
So we'll see what the opening is going to be. What needs to be sorted. DeMusliM, yeah, it is going to be instantly the blacksmith as anticipated. Sometimes he follows up the second one immediately. Sometimes he'll just lock in a stables first. If you feel like you are going to go for the double blacksmith early, I think stables is more desirable than the archery range because it allows you to choose the way you want to combat this. And VortiX is doing the same, but follow-up is going to be a Rax, and note the placement of this. This is intentional because of the scout coming on the side. He wants to try and hide the detail, but Dimu, his spidey senses are tingling. He says, "What are you keeping from me?"
That's a terrific spot for the barracks, by the way. It's shielded from vision from 2 sides by the major forests, and then from the stealth forest perspective on the north, there is also no vision or no easy vision for DeMusliM to gain on it. So that's possibly the best hiding spot for that barracks, but DeMusliM, he didn't take it. He's just going to spot that right away, so nothing hidden from his eyes.
I think he even spotted the archery range follow-up, so he knows fully what he is going to be up against. For DeMusliM, it should just be stables into archery range. It's a reasonable play here. We talked a little bit about how use the horseman spin feels better. I think it's a little bit weirder with the TOV play on a map like Basin, just simply because the horseman can still go on the flanks, right? And you know that both of you are going to need to play pocket eco. I think the goal for DeMusliM is going to be to end up with all 3 unit types eventually, but opening up with horseman just allows you to not sacrifice your army, right? You can always get out of a jam.
So far, it's going to be a mix of spear and archers, but we already see
stables
stable coming in. Yep. It's going to be a mix of everything.
VortiX is a little bit faster on all of this so far, and I'm trying to figure out where DeMusliM done something different. He's holding a lot of gold in comparison, so it might be his intent is to build additional scholars. I wonder if he scouted out just how much aggression he's potentially up against. And his original plan was to go for a second mosque, but once he saw what was happening, he realized all of his wood had to go into military production instead. So now he's just kind of stuck with this gold he can't use.
Yeah, that's a bit of a problem for him, but it's not like there is a terrific amount of units coming out here from VortiX, so for the time being, he can get away by floating a little bit more gold. The alarming detail will be when Sanctity comes in for VortiX, because he's got a head start when it comes to taking a position near that central sacred site.
Yeah, and of course, when you've got the infantry like this, you can just begin walling up as well. It is quite pricey on the wood at this stage and a mirror, so he'll just keep posturing aggression for the time being. But eyeballs are on, and he sees the lay of the lands, and DeMusliM, interesting enough, he pulled both of his scholars into military efficiency, so he banked them in the production buildings instead. Means his tech speeds are very slow to what they otherwise could be. But it does mean he can, of course, get more units out to protect.
Oh, this is a lovely fight for him. He's actually using a horseman on top of those archers, getting a couple of picks, and then the spearman doing tremendous damage here to the horseman. Obviously, you can offset some of this by healing, but this was a really good engagement here for VortiX.
I think DeMusliM done a decent job of defending there as well. Like, he didn't even have to pull his villagers back. It shows his intent is to produce more scholars now after he got Sanctity, and is now looking to capture that sacred site. VortiX on the other side isn't interested in more scholars. You've seen this big difference. Like, it's all food and wood. He just wants to get a military edge and push that edge. And the cool thing is, by doing this type of build, if you do maintain that aggression, the gold difference gradually gets made up by the fact you'll have the central sacred site.
And once again, VortiX is the aggressor over here, getting some nice picks on those archers. Maybe diving a little too deep, though. He's got to be cautious. If he loses the horseman, there's going to be nothing to protect those archers with.
Yeah, but he's got a horseman edge. Like, once again, it's because he's just investing raw military clump. Like, he tends to have a unit or two advantage. DeMusliM, on the other hand, long-term, this scholar play is better, but in the short term, it leaves you a bit weaker, which is why you've seen so far Ben doesn't want to come out of his base. He's very kind of, no, you come to me, right? I don't, no bueno, I don't want to participate.
Yeah, VortiX holding that sacred site for a couple extra moments, but now DeMusliM is there to decap it. Still, that's a little extra gold for VortiX to work with, and this is where we have to start talking about those little details that are slightly favoring VortiX right now.
Looks like a rough fight for DeMusliM to take as well. Scholars may give him the edge. This is the difference, right? He's able to pull Scholars for combat healing. Of course, that did get nerfed, but can be a difference maker. And because VortiX's army is so small, he can't snipe out those Scholars. He has to kill everything else first. But DeMusliM, unable to guard these archers well. They're going to be wiped out. And at that point, you only really have horsemen here. Scholars will be beaten down by the remnant horsemen on the backside. That's a heavy cost for Dimu.
Lovely play here by VortiX. He prioritized the archers, and sure thing, the scholars are still alive, but there's nothing left to heal. And one big difference between the two players is that VortiX has a couple of spearmen. So by getting rid of the archers, you open up the playing field for the spearmen to start massacring those horsemen, and that's exactly what we're seeing. Just one or two spearmen in there, but that's enough to push back the forces of DeMusliM, once again gaining massive momentum as VortiX.
What we are seeing here is how times have changed. The build from DeMusliM is one that would have worked fantastically just last year. It's the typical build to go for. Get the healing involved before the archer mass gets too big. But VortiX, he says no. He says nerfs. Do you know what they mean? They hurt. Feel the pain as the healing does not work anymore. DeMusliM finds that out the hard way. I mean, what was that? Almost 4 scholars going down that fight? And now, once again, you're in a situation where you went the scholars early, VortiX has been waiting on the passive gold trickle, and now he can come in and build more scholars than you're capable of.
Well, wait a second. Wait for a second. Is DeMusliM just now capturing his sacred site?
I think so.
That's
Unless
terrible.
it got decapped. The only possibility is like it got decapped, but I think you might be right, because he ran into the center to try and heal. That was his priority.
I don't see it being decapped. There was just so much focus on the middle, but if this is the first time he's capturing it, it's a disaster because...
It's another scholar gone.
Yeah.
Just about survives. But this is problematic. Like, you know, you still haven't captured it. You've been idled out. Like, VortiX can afford to throw so much more at this. You can see how relentless he is. This is something that VortiX is known for. Absolute frustration to play against him because once he gets a slight edge, once he smells blood in the water, he does not stop.
Yeah, DeMusliM is actually lucky to get away with that low HP Scholar. VortiX didn't notice how weak it was. He could have actually stabbed it with the Horseman, but still, I just struggle to see how VortiX would have been able to decap that sacred site with just like one sneak unit or so. It makes me feel like DeMusliM didn't have it captured the whole time.
He's got Horseman scouts. I think it's possible because we have to remember DeMusliM had to commit all of his units to defend the front side because he was already losing that battle. So it wouldn't surprise me. I feel like it's like such a standard plan base and it'd be very surprising if he didn't do it. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and just say this was VortiX with a decap, which wouldn't surprise me. And now, with such a dominant military lead, with this many archers, you get to a stage where your horsemen can't even necessarily stand their ground, especially when so many of them are injured like this, and DeMu doesn't really have the extra gold to afford scholars to try and heal in these battles. Instead, he'll just have to move on to game 2, as VortiX will win the Delhi Mirror.
What a game here by VortiX. Mirrors are always about those small differences, and whether it was DeMusliM being late to capture that sacred site, or it was indeed VortiX being able to get away with a sneaky decap, the end of the story, or the moral of the story, is that we had more sacred sites for VortiX, and that's the difference that sets him up to just overwhelm with better numbers. That small difference escalating into something massive, and you can see that in the military graphs.
Yeah, absolute dominance from VortiX. You know, it was interesting talking to Lucy after he was able to beat VortiX in round 1 final, and you know, they said, "Oh, this round kind of plays our style." I'm not sure about the other ones, but judging by what we saw there, you know, in game 1, obviously it's only one game so far, but I think VortiX looking as hot as he was in the first round. The question now is whether DeMusliM can heat up as we get into game 2 in just a few minutes. Because remember, folks, these are still best of 3s. So if DeMusliM wants to keep that lifeline of being in the upper bracket, he's going to have to turn it around in the second.
Indeed, and it would be kind of problematic for DeMusliM to fall down to the losers bracket here on the round of 16.